The Horse and His Boy, Chapter 3, At the Gates of Tashbaan. "My name," said the girl at once, "is Aravis Tarkina, and I'm the only daughter of Kidrash Tarkan, the son of Rishti Tarkan, the son of Kidrash Tarkan, the son of El-Sombre Tisroc, the son of Ardib Tisroc, who is descended in a right line from the god Tash. My father is lord of the province of Calavar, and is one who has the right of standing on his feet in his shoes before the face of Tisroc himself. May he live for ever. My mother, on whom be peace of the gods, is dead, and my father has married another wife. One of my brothers has fallen in battle against the rebels in the far west, and the other is a child. Now it came to pass that my father's wife, my stepmother, hated me, and the sun appeared dark in her eyes as long as I lived in my father's house, and so she persuaded my father to promise me in marriage to Ashatar Tarkan. Now, this Ashatar is of base birth, though in latter years he has won the favour of the Tisroc, may he live for ever, by flattery and evil counsels, and now made a Tarkan and lord of many cities, and is likely to be chosen as the great vizier when the present grand vizier dies. Moreover, he's at least 60 years old, and has a hump on his back, and his face resembles that of an ape. Nevertheless, my father, because of the wealth and power of this Ashatar, and being persuaded by his wife, sent messengers offering me in marriage, and the offer was favourably accepted, and Ashatar sent word that he would marry me this very year, at the time of high summer. When this news was brought to me, the sun appeared dark in my eyes, and I laid myself on my bed and wept for days. But on the second day I rose up and washed my face and caused my mare Hwin to be saddled, and took with me a sharp dagger which my brother had carried in the Western Wars, and rode out alone. And my father's house was out of sight, and I was come to a green open place in a certain wood, where there were no dwellings of men. I dismounted from Hwin, my mare, and took out the dagger. Then I parted my clothes where I thought the readiness was to lay my heart, and I prayed to all the gods that as soon as I was dead I might find myself with my brother. After that I shut my eyes and my teeth and prepared to drive the dagger into my heart. But before I had done so, this mare spoke, the voice of one of the daughters of men, and said, "O my mistress, do not by any means destroy yourself, for if you live you may yet have good fortune, but all the dead are dead alike." "I didn't say it half so well as that," muttered the mare. "Hush, madam, hush," said Brie, who was thoroughly enjoying the story. "She's telling it in the grand Calomene manner, and no storyteller in a Tisroc court could do it any better. Pray go on, Tarkina." "When I heard the language of men uttered by my mare," continued Aravis, "I said to myself, the fear of death has disordered my reason and subjected me to dreams. And I became full of shame, for none of my lineage ought to fear death more than biting of a gnat. Therefore I addressed myself a second time to stabbing. But Hwin came nearer to me and put her head between me and the dagger, and talked with me most excellent reasons, and rebuked me as a mother rebukes a child. And now my wonder was so great that I forgot about killing myself and about Ashatar, and said, 'Oh, my mare, how have you learned to speak like one of the daughters of men?' And Hwin told me what is known to all this company, that in Narnia there are beasts that talk, and now she herself was stolen from thence, and when she was a little foal. She told me also of the woods and the waters of Narnia, and the castles and the great ships, till I said, 'In the name of Tash and Azeroth and the Lady of the Night, I have a great wish to be in that country of Narnia.' "Oh, my mistress," answered the mayor, "if you were in Narnia you would be happy, for in that land no maiden is forced to marry against her will." And when we had talked together for a great time, hope returned to me, and I rejoiced that I had not killed myself. Moreover, it was agreed between Win and me that we should steal ourselves away together, and we planned it in this fashion. We returned to my father's house, and I put on my gayest clothes and sang and danced before my father and pretended to be delighted with the marriage which he had prepared for me. Also I said to him, "Oh, my father, and oh, the delight of my eyes, give me your permission to go with one of my maidens alone for 3 days into the woods to do secret sacrifices to the Lady of the Night, as is proper and customary for damsels when they must bid farewell and prepare themselves for marriage." He answered, "Oh, my daughter, and oh, the delight of my eyes, so it shall be." But when I came out from the presence of my father, I went immediately to the oldest of his slaves, his secretary, who had bounced me on his knee when I was a baby, and loved me more than the air and the light, and I swore him to be secret and begged him to write a certain letter for me. And he wept and implored me to change my mind, but in the end he said, "To hear is to obey," and did my will, and I sealed the letter and hid it in my clothes. "But what was in the letter?" asked Shasta. "Be quiet, youngster," said Bree. "You're spoiling the story. She'll tell us about the letter in the right place. Go on, Tarkina." Then I called the maid, who was to go with me to the woods and perform the rites, and told her to wake me very early in the morning, and I became merry with her and gave her wine to drink. But I'd mixed such things in her cup that I knew that she would sleep for a night and a day. As soon as the household of my father had committed themselves to sleep, I got up, put on the armour of my brother, which I always kept in my chamber in his memory. I put into my belt all the money I had and certain choice jewels, and provided myself with food, and saddled the mare with my own hands and rode away in the second watch of the night. I directed my course not to the woods where my father supposed that I would go, but north and east to Tashbaan. Now for 3 days and more I knew that my father would not seek me, being deceived by the words that I'd said to him, and on the 4th day we arrived in the city of Azimbalda. Now Azimbalda stands at the meeting of many roads, and from it the posts of the Tisroc, may he live forever, ride on swift horses to every part of the empire, and it is one of the rights and privileges of the greater Tarkans to send messages by them. I therefore went to the chief of the messengers in the house of Imperial Pots in Azimbalda and said, "O dispatcher of the messages, here is a letter from my uncle to Kidrash Tarkan, Lord of Kalavar. Take now these 5 crescents and send it to him." And the chief of the messengers said, "To hear is to obey." This letter was to be written by Ashotar, and this was the significance of the writing. Ashotar Tarkan to Kidrash Tarkan, salutations and peace. In the name of Tash, be it known to you that I made my journey toward your house to be married to your daughter, Aravis Tarkina. It pleased fortune and the gods that I fell in with her in the forest, and when she ended the rites and the sacrifices according to the customs of maidens, and when I learned who she was, being delighted with her beauty and her discretion, I became in love with her, and it appeared to me that the sun would be dark to me if I did not marry her at once. Accordingly, I prepared the necessities and the sacrifices and married your daughter at the same hour that I met her, and have returned with her to my own house, and we both pray and charge you to come as speedily as you may, that we may be delighted with your face and speech, and also that you may bring with you the dowry of my wife, which, by reason of my great charges and expenses, I require without delay. Because you and I are brothers, I assure myself that you will not be angered by the speed of our marriage, which is wholly occasioned by the great love I bear your daughter. I commit you to the care of all the gods. As soon as I had done this, I rode on in all haste from Azimbolda, fearing no pursuit, and expecting that my father, having received such a letter, would send messages to Ashitar, or go to him himself, and that before the matter was discovered, I should be beyond Tashbaan. And this is the pith of my story, until this very night, when I was chased by lions and met you at the swimming of the salt water. And what happened to the girl, the one you drugged? Asked Shasta. Doubtless she was beating for sleeping late, said Aravis. But she was a tool and a spy of my stepmother. I'm very glad they should beat her. I say, that was hardly fair, said Shasta. I did not do any of these things for the sake of pleasing you, said Aravis. And there's another thing I don't understand about that story, said Shasta. You're not grown up. I don't believe you're any older than I am. I don't believe you're old. How could you be getting married at your age? Aravis said nothing. But Bree at once said, Shasta, don't display your ignorance. They're always married at this age in the great Tarkan families. Shasta turned very red, though it was hardly light enough for the others to see, and felt snubbed. Aravis asked Bree for his story. Bree told it, and Shasta thought that he put a great deal more in than he needed about the falls and all the bad riding. Bree obviously thought it very funny, but Aravis didn't laugh. Then Bree had finished. They all went to sleep. Next day, all four of them, 2 horses and 2 humans, continued their journey together. Shasta thought it had been much pleasanter when he and Bree were there on their own, for now it was Bree and Aravis who did nearly all the talking. Bree had lived a long time in Kalaman, and had always been among Tarkans and Tarkans' horses, and, of course, he knew many great same people and the places that Aravis knew. She would always be saying things like, but if you were at the fight, you would have seen my cousin. And Bree would answer, oh yes, he was the only captain of the chariots, you know. I don't quite hold with chariots or the kind of horses that draw chariots. It's not real cavalry, but he's a worthy nobleman. He filled my nosebag with sugar after talking of Tibeth. Or Bree would say, I was down at the lake that summer, and Aravis would say, oh, there, I've had a friend there. What a delightful place it is, those gardens and the valley of the 1,000 perfumes. Bree was not in the least trying to leave Shasta out of things, though Shasta sometimes nearly thought he was. People who know a lot of the same things can hardly help talking about them, and if you are there, you can hardly help feeling that you're out of it. When the mare was rather shy before the great war horse, like Bree, and she said very little, and Aravis never spoke to Shasta at all if she could help it. Soon, however, they had more important things to think of. They were getting near Tashbaan. There were more and larger villages and more people on the roads. They now did nearly all their travelling by night and hid as best they could during the day. And at the halt they argued about what they were to do and when they were going to reach Tashbaan. Everyone had been putting off this difficulty, but now could be put off no longer. During these discussions, Aravis became a very little, less unfriendly to Shasta, one usually gets on better with people when there's plan making, when one is talking about nothing in particular. Bree said the first thing now to do was to fix a place where they would all promise to meet on the far side of Tashbaan, even if, by any ill luck, they'd got separated in the passing of the city. He said the best place would be the tombs of the ancient kings on the very edge of the desert. Things like great stone beehives, he said. You can't possibly miss them, and the best of it is that none of the Calamans will go near them because they think the place is haunted by ghouls and are afraid of it. Aravis asked if it wasn't really haunted by ghouls, but Bree said he was a free Narnian horse and didn't believe in these Calamine tales. And then Shasta said he wasn't a Calamine either, and he didn't care a straw about those old stories of ghouls. This wasn't quite true, but it was rather impressive to Aravis, and of course she said she didn't mind a number of ghouls either. So it was settled that the tombs should be their assembly place on the other side of Tashbaan, and everybody felt they were getting on very well, till Hwyn humbly pointed out that the real problem was not where they should go when they got through Tashbaan, but how they were to get through. We'll settle that tomorrow, madam, said Bree. Time for sleep now. But it wasn't easy to settle. Aravis's first suggestion was that they should swim across the river below the city during the night and not go into the Tashbaan at all. But Bree had two reasons against this. One was that the river mouth was very wide, and it would be far too long a swim for Hwyn to do, especially with a rider on her back. He thought it would be too long for himself too, but he didn't say that. The other was that it would be full of shipping, and of course everyone on the deck of the ship who saw two horses swimming past would be almost certain to be inquisitive. Shasta thought that they should go up the river above Tashbaan and across where it was narrower, but Bree explained that there were gardens and pleasure houses on both banks of the river for miles, and there would be Tarkans and Tarkinas living in them and riding about on the roads and having water parties on the river. In fact, it would be most likely place in the world for meeting someone who would recognise Aravis or even himself. We'll have to be in disguise, said Shasta. Hwyn said it looked to her as if the safest thing was to go right through the city itself from gate to gate, because one was less likely to be noticed in the crowd. But she approved of the idea of a disguise as well. She said both the humans will have to dress in rags and look like peasants or slaves, and all Aravis's armour and our saddles and things must be made into bundles and put on our backs, and the children must pretend to drive us, and people will think we're only pack horses. My dear Hwyn, said Aravis rather scornfully, as if anyone would mistake Bree for anything but a war horse. However would you disguise him? I should think not indeed, said Bree, snorting and letting his ears go back ever so little. I know it's not a very good plan, said Hwyn, but I think it's our only chance, and we haven't been groomed for ages, and we're not looking quite ourselves. At least, I'm sure I'm not. I do think that we'll get well plastered with mud, and we could go along with our heads down as if we're tired and lazy and don't lift our hooves hardly at all. We might not be noticed, and our tails ought to be cut shorter, not neatly, you know, but all ragged. My dear madam, said Bree, have you pictured to yourself how very disagreeable it would be to arrive in Narnia in that condition? Well, said Hwyn. She was a very sensible mare. The main thing is to get there. Though nobody liked it much, it was Hwyn's plan which had to be adopted in the end. It was a troublesome one, and involved a certain amount of what Shasta called stealing, and Bree called raiding. One farm lost a few stacks of that evening, and another lost a coil of rope the next, but some tattered old boys' clothes for Aravis to wear and had to be fairly bought and paid for in the village. Shasta returned with them in triumph just as an evening was closing in. The others were waiting for him among the trees at the foot of the low range of the wooded hills, which lay right across their path. Everyone was feeling excited because this was the last hill. When they reached the ridge at the top, they would be looking down on Tashbaan. "I do wish we were safely past it," muttered Shasta to Hwin. "Oh, I do," said Hwin fervently. That night they wound their way through the woods up to the ridge by the woodcutter's track, and when they came out of the woods at the top, they could see thousands of lights in the valley down below them. Shasta had had no notion of what a great city would be like, and it frightened him. They had their supper and the children got more sleep, but the horses woke them very early in the morning. The stars were still out and the grass was terribly cold and wet, but daybreak was just beginning. Aravis went a few steps away into the wood and came back, looking odd in her new ragged clothes and carrying her real ones in a bundle. These, and her armour and shield and scimitar and the 2 saddles and the rest of the horse's fine furnishings were put into sacks. Bree and Hwin had already got themselves as dirty and bedraggled as they could, and it only remained to shorten their tails. As the only tool for doing this was Aravis's scimitar, one of the packs had to be undone again in order to get it out. It was a longish job and rather hurt the horses. "My word," said Bree, "if I wasn't a talking horse, what a lovely kick in the face I would give you. I thought you were going to cut it, not pull it out. That's what it feels like." But in spite of the semi-darkness and cold fingers, all done in the end. The big packs bound on the horses and the rope halters, which they were now wearing instead of the bridles and the reins, were in the children's hands, and the journey began. "Remember," said Bree, "keep together if we possibly can. If not, meet at the tombs of the ancient kings, and whoever gets there first must wait for the others." "And remember," said Shasta, "don't you 2 horses forget yourselves and start talking whatever happens." And that's the end of the chapter.